Well, it's the unknown mechanic back, and this channel is for the shop owner who doesn't have technicians that can tighten a nut or a bolt and don't know what the hell they're doing. And it's also for the aspiring technician who wants to raise their level and not have to bother their boss every 5 minutes on what to do. And it's also for the do-it-yourselfer who may want to learn how to do some troubleshooting and repairs on your own and not waste a lot of time and money going down the wrong rabbit hole. So today we are going to be working on a Stihl chainsaw, and looks like the customer has done some work on it and it didn't work and he gave up. It belongs to Clem Yodelhopper, and it says won't start, call with estimate. Customer tried to replace the ignition coil with an aftermarket, but still would not start. So he's brought in the original Stihl coil that came off of it, and we are going to have to call him with an estimate after we do a little bit of evaluation. So this coil says Hepang on it, and I don't know where it came from. It says made in China. Maybe it came from Alibaba or Amazon or something. I also noticed that it's got a brand new chain on it, and it says it's not a Stihl chain, it's not an Oregon chain. It says IKEA, or I see, Kakia. So he's got some kind of weird chain on there too. I'll check the fuel. Well, that's mixed gas. Don't see anything wrong there. The gas is pretty clean. It has a green tint to it, so I think that's probably all right. We're going to do Stihl's official compression test. It's called a drop test, and this unit has got good compression. Yeah, if I was holding the starter handle and the engine were to drop every 2 or 3 seconds, that would indicate that the piston ring, the cylinder, there's some kind of mechanical damage, and what it would have to do, take the muffler off and look in there with a flashlight. But this saw appears to be almost brand new, very low hours on it. This is a homeowner unit that's not being used high hours. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what he's done with the ignition coil. Okay, I see some suspicious looking black tape here. That doesn't look good. Okay, there's some electrical tape. Okay, he's Frankensteined the Stihl boot onto a Chinese coil. Okay, you never want to do something like that. the insulating properties on this skimpy electrical tape are nowhere near the 7mm rubber insulation on a high tension wire. That's a huge problem. So let's have a look here. Okay, here's the coil that came off of it, and he's just cut the wire and removed this Chinese spark plug terminal, and he's Frankensteined on the MS171 Stihl spark plug boot that's got a low profile and fits under the cylinder cover. So first thing I need to do before I go any farther is I've got to look up an ignition coil, and I've got to restore the ignition, and then I can proceed and go deeper. So I'm going to pause for a second and I'm going to do some parts lookup. Okay, I'm back, and we do not stock that ignition coil. And for all you aspiring mechanics out there and your do-it-yourselfers, when you go in and you're buying parts, you know, you want to ask, what is the sales history and the failure rate on whatever part it is that you're looking for? And there's a reason why we don't stock this coil. The reason is that we've never sold one. Sold thousands and thousands and thousands of Stihl chainsaws, never sold a single ignition coil for a 171. And sales history is your clue. The reason why we've never sold one before is that they never go bad. These coils, you know, 99.99% of them, you know, last beyond the life of the chainsaw, and even on another saw and another saw and another saw after that. And so if you're, you know, just throwing parts at a machine hoping that, you know, it's going to run, that's a big mistake. And especially if there's zero sales history and zero failure rate. You would want to look elsewhere first before you do something like that. So I'm going to have to pause on this job, and it's going to be waiting parts. And when we get a new ignition coil in and remove this Chinese one, then I'm going to, you know, go deeper and we'll see what happens. So we'll come back on this one. Okay, a few days have gone by and our Stihl part shipments have come in, and we have the right ignition coil now for this 171. So I'm going to do a little bit of disassembly. that engine feels tight. I think we've got something going on with the clutch or the chain brake. Maybe that's why it won't start. Got a heat insulator. Don't want to lose that. Okay, we've got something is wrong here. This crankshaft does not turn. There's a lot of resistance. So I'm going to take the bar and chain off and do some inspection on this end of the engine. Okay, I see what's wrong here. Bring you in for a close-up. Get the flashlight. Okay, he's got the chain wedged in between the clutch washer and the sprocket. That is not going to start like that. That's a parasitic load, and if he did get it started, he would do some serious damage. So that's a pretty simple problem. Okay, now that's all freed up. Put it on properly. continue on with I have to change my squeaky stool here. Pause for a second. Okay. Before I tighten these screws down, I'm going to use the air gap tool. That's pretty good. Right in there. Spark plug back in. This is the Bosch USR 7AC. I'm going to double check that, make sure that's correct, but put that in now. I prefer to tighten by hand rather than strip something with an impact gun. All right, I think we're ready to, we're going to try to start it. I think I'm probably going to change his fuel. There's not much fuel in it anyway. That's why I drained it. I'm going to put our shop fuel in it. Never trust the customer's fuel. And then we're going to go outside and try to start it. Okay, we're back in the shop after an unsuccessful attempted start. And one thing you would not want to do is, pull the rope 500 times and spend an hour out there. If it doesn't pop or give a puff of smoke or something within 30 seconds, you got to come back to the drawing board. So we're back in here to do some troubleshooting steps. It's very unlikely that the brand new ignition coil is faulty, but I'm just going to check that anyway. And I've had a lot of crappy mechanics that work for me. We had Secret Agent Man, and we had the Big Asset, and Gomer, and Dingus, and Sniffles, and Scratch, and Einstein, and Speedy, and one thing like Einstein would do is he would test the spark, not see any spark, and then hold up the job and order a coil, and not realizing that most Stihl ignition coils only jump a 2 millimeter gap. That's all they're required to jump. And on my tester here, if I zero this out, each turn is 1 millimeter. So if I go 2 turns out, that's 2 millimeters. And that is the gap that a properly functioning Stihl ignition coil is supposed to jump. And so I'm going to hook up the spark tester and just make sure that we do have spark. And with Einstein, what I'd like to do with Einstein is hook up the spark tester to his balls and then pull the rope, and if he jumps, then that means the spark is good. And that would be Einstein's official spark testing method. So we got to connect this and then find a good ground. And I'm going to put this under the bench in the dark. I'm going to have to turn the camera, set up the camera so we can test the spark in the dark. I'm going to shut off for a second. Okay, we'll give it a try and see what happens. Okay, we definitely have spark. I knew that was not a problem. So I'm going to put it back up onto the bench. Okay, we have eliminated the ignition module. Definitely has good spark. But I did double check on the spark plug, and the Bosch USR 7AC is considered the hot 10 millimeter plug for the 28cc 4-mix engine. It's not correct for this. It's supposed to use a NGK CMR6H or the Stihl Cold 10. And when you use NGK, you do need to shorten the gap from 26 thousandths, that's what they come pre-gapped out of the box, down to 0.5 millimeter or 20 thousandths. So I have replaced the Bosch plug with the NGK CMR6H, and I don't think that's the issue why it won't start, but that would possibly make a running issue later on down the road, having the wrong heat range of plug in it. As far as Einstein, what Einstein would do is use a Briggs & Stratton spark tester, and the gap on the Briggs tester is preset at about 6 millimeters, and that's why he was always getting a false negative on his spark testing. He just used that tester for everything. And it's very important that you use the right tester and set the gap correctly. So he would unnecessarily condemn perfectly good ignition coils and delay the job waiting for parts and replace coils unnecessarily. when, that wasn't the problem. So I'm satisfied with the ignition, and another thought had occurred to me that the drop test that I did previously could have gotten a false negative. And that's because the chain was jammed under the sprocket washer. So now you can see that, the saw does drop, but it takes several seconds each drop. So just to confirm that the compression is not an issue, I'm going to pop the muffler off and take a quick look, and we'll see what happens. And that piston looks like it's brand new. It's a brand new engine. So definitely not a problem there. So that definitely eliminates that as a possible cause. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pressure test the fuel line in a carburetor by removing the fuel filter, pulling the line out of the tank, and hooking up my leak detector. To remove the fuel filter for this. Hook up the leak detector. And there's no leaks. You only need to pump this up to about 7 psi or half a bar. If there was a hole in the fuel hose or the inlet needle and seat in the carburetor were dirty and being held open, the detector would drop here and indicate that. So what we're going to do is we are going to try to go outside and start it again. And this time I'm going to take my primer. And if it will start and run on a prime, then that would indicate that the carburetor is at fault and is going to need some attention. So, put this back. Actually, I'm going to leave this off because I want to access this for priming. So I'm going to pause the camera and we're going to move outside. Okay, we're going to try to start it, and if it won't start, I'm going to prime it and see if it will start and run on a prime. Okay, it only wants to run when I'm operating the choke. We've got some kind of a fuel restriction, so I'm just going to take it into the shop and we're going to get into the carburetor. Okay, back into the bench, and as you can see, the engine is definitely starving for fuel. We have a carburetor issue. The carburetor will have to either be replaced or cleaned. And I have to prepare an accurate estimate and contact the customer before I go any further, now that I know what's wrong with it. Definitely the compression and the mechanical condition of the engine is excellent. Brand new chain, ignition restored when it was unnecessarily monkeyed with by the customer. And that leaves us with the fuel issue. And I know that the fuel line is good. My estimate is going to include either a new carburetor, which is very reasonably priced at $56.89, and a new fuel filter. May not need a new carburetor. We don't know until we take the old carburetor off and at least do a quick check on it. So at this point, you know, a chainsaw, if this was a 170, the price point on an MS170 is about $200, $220. But this is the low emission version of the 170. It's the 171, and it's more expensive. And whenever you get to, you know, 50% of replacement cost and or its resale value, that's when you might want to pause and consider buying a new saw. So I'm going to, you know, talk about that with the customer and see what he wants to do. Part of his expense is his own fault by Frankensteining the Chinese ignition coil and ruining his perfectly good Stihl ignition coil. So he will have to accept the responsibility for that, and that's $51.23 of the cost of this repair. He's responsible for that. So I'm going to pause and go make a phone call and see if I can get a hold of him and get an authorization. Okay, I got off the phone with the owner and told him all of the issues, and he said as long as it doesn't go over $200, fix it. So I'm going to start taking things apart. We're going to get the carburetor out of it. Let's see, this air filter is pretty clean. It's an interesting design. It has two keyed holes, and that's to help you prevent you from putting the filter backwards. On this style of filter, you know, when dirt is trapped on the outer surface, you don't want to just take this out and then put the dirty side in. And that's what those two keyed holes are for, to prevent that. Okay, there's a screw, third screw down here, and it's missing. So I think maybe he was in here trying to tinker with this, left a screw out. Choke link, that's pretty easy. At this point it should just come off. Yep. Not too difficult to get that apart. You know, before I condemn this carburetor, I'm just going to pop the pump cover off and the metering cover off and take a quick look, see if it's salvageable. And when you take these apart, you want to look at the head of the screw and see if there's a dot next to the cross. And if there is, that would identify it as a JIS, Japanese Industrial Standard screw. And you need to have one of these JIS screwdrivers. This one came from Echo. It's a vessel. But you can also get these from Amazon, and they fit much better than an American Phillips in these type of screws. Okay, there's a lot of fuel in there. That's a good sign. And then there's the problem. The secondary fuel filter is blocked with very fine debris of some kind. Something has been getting by the primary filter in the tank and going downstream, and it's gotten trapped in here to the point where not enough fuel will pass through there. So I'm going to bring the camera in and for a close-up. And you can see that that screen is totally blocked. And that's what's restricting our fuel. cover off too. Take a look at the metering side. Okay, one of the clues, there's very little fuel in the metering chamber, as opposed to there was quite a bit of fuel in the pump chambers here. Looks very clean. You can see that this style of carburetor is one of the more modern carburetors. It has a semi-fixed jet design, and they do that on the newer ones. Because in a fully adjustable needle valve style carburetor, the tip of the needle will extend into the hole in the jet. And if you're operating the chainsaw in extremely high temperatures and you're using like an 87 grade gas, which you're not supposed to use, you're supposed to use 89 or 91, small air bubbles will start forming when the fuel is just about to vapor lock and vaporize. And in a needle valve setup, with the tip of the needle in the center of the jet, the air bubbles will get trapped and the saw will lean out and die and vapor lock. With the semi-fixed jet carburetor, there's just a small hole in the jet, no needle tip blocking the path, and some of the fuel can bypass the needle valve and the air bubbles will go right on through without getting caught and blocking it. And that's what you're going to see on the more modern chainsaws. They have that style of carburation. So I think I'm going to look to see if I have a metering diaphragm, maybe a pump diaphragm. These look brand new, but if I have them, I'm just going to put them in there. So I'm going to pause, and I'm also going to remove that block screen out of there and figure out how to clean that. I like to use a very, very sharp tool. It's sort of shaped like a basket. There, it came out. I'm going to have to figure out how to either ultrasonic clean it, carburetor clean it, spray it, blow it, or replace it. So I'm going to go look for some parts, and I'm pause and come back. Okay, I'm back, and I have found a new diaphragm. And I was unable to find a new screen. So we're just going to try to clean the old screen since it's metal. Okay, I've got my screen clean. There's the debris that was in there. And put that back in. Little basket shape. You can use any kind of a round tool to just push that basket down in there. And I like to rebuild wet. And I'm going to use the new metering diaphragm. I'm not going to bother to check the metering lever. Nobody's messed with that. But I am going to be using this new diaphragm. Tighten in a crisscross pattern. There it is. Need my choke link. Blow the dust off that. And there is an O-ring on that fitting that's going to seal this, and the rest of it just goes on. And I looked up the missing screw. I'm going to apply that. And I like to tighten things by hand rather than use the impact gun. All right, now I'm going to pause the camera. We're going to move outside and going to see if it runs perfectly. Hopefully it will. Okay, ready for a test run. Going to find out. Keep your fingers crossed. Hopefully it'll run. Okay, my camera ran out of battery in the middle of the test run, but as you can see, it ran quite well. This is the debris that was in the secondary filter inside the carburetor. The secondary filter did a very good job capturing all of it. Primary filter, a little coarser. I elected to replace that anyway, just to be on the safe side. And that's how you troubleshoot and repair. You've got to have compression, you've got to have ignition at the right time, and you've got to have fuel. And in this case, it came down to no fuel, and so the carburetor was the issue. And hope you can apply all these tools and techniques to other chainsaws that you work on, and that's how the job's done. So in conclusion, it's the Unknown Mechanic signing off. See you on the next one. I don't know what it'll be.